The thing Alyssa remembered years later wasn't the woman in the black dress. It was the way Franklin laughed. She was standing outside the ballroom doors at 9:17 that night, one hand gripping her purse so hard her fingers hurt, staring through the narrow opening before she walked in. Franklin was near the bar with a drink in his hand, and for a second, he looked like the same man she'd known since she was 16, except he didn't look worried. He didn't look guilty. He was laughing, really laughing, head tilted back a little, like he didn't have a wife at home wondering why he'd been distant for months, like he hadn't spent the last week telling Alyssa he had to work late on Saturday. And beside him stood a woman in a black dress with her hand resting on his arm, like she'd been standing there all along. The woman leaned close and whispered something in his ear. Franklin smiled. Then the woman looked toward the ballroom entrance and smirked. Not a big smile, just that small look people get when they think they've already won. Alyssa felt Denise touch her elbow. "You still have time to leave," Denise said softly. For a second, Alyssa almost did. Then she looked down at the red dress she'd nearly talked herself out of wearing, the one Denise had pulled out of the back of her closet and practically forced into her hands. When she looked back through those doors, Franklin was still laughing, and something inside her went completely still. "No," she said. "I think I need to see who my husband really is when he thinks I'm not in the room." Then she pushed open the doors. "Welcome to Mr. Graham's story, my beautiful, amazing family. Y'all have been so supportive, and I promise to always do my best to give you the best as I learn and improve every day. If this is your first time watching, comment below with where you're watching from, and subscribe to officially join the family." By the time Alyssa turned 32, she could tell what kind of day it was by the sound of the waiting room at the pediatric clinic. On good days, there was the low hum of cartoons from the mounted television, the crinkle of sticker wrappers, and little kids arguing over which lollipop color tasted better. On bad days, there was too much crying. That Tuesday had been somewhere in the middle. A little boy with an ear infection had screamed every time anybody came near him. A tired mother had cried quietly in the hallway because she couldn't afford the prescription the doctor wanted her son to take. One toddler had thrown up on Alyssa's shoes. By 5:30, her back hurt, her head hurt, and all she wanted was to go home, kick off her shoes, and sit on the couch with Franklin while one of those ridiculous reality shows played in the background. Instead, her phone buzzed. "Mama," Alyssa answered before she even made it to her car. "Please tell me you remembered what day it is," Lorraine said without saying hello. Alyssa closed her eyes. "Lord, the dinner." "Not just dinner. Sunday dinner moved to Tuesday because your grandmother has a cardiologist appointment Sunday afternoon, and if you forgot that too, I am officially giving up on you." Alyssa laughed tiredly and leaned against her car door in the parking lot. "I'm coming. Give me 30 minutes. Bring bread," Marcus forgot. Marcus is 30 years old, and somehow still believes dinner appears by magic. The line went dead. Alyssa smiled despite herself. Some things in her family never changed. The house she grew up in sat 3 streets over from the one she lived in now. Same neighborhood, same cracked sidewalks, same chain-link fences, same women sitting on porches with paper fans and enough neighborhood information to run the FBI. Miami had changed over the years. The little houses where they grew up now sat beside expensive townhomes and coffee shops with $6 iced drinks. But her block still smelled like somebody grilling chicken, somebody else's laundry detergent, and rain sitting on hot pavement. By the time Alyssa walked into her mother's house, balancing 2 bags of groceries and a loaf of bread under one arm, her grandmother was already in the kitchen complaining. "Your mother put too much salt in the greens," Miss Evelyn said. "You say that every week," Alyssa said, kissing her cheek. "Because every week she keeps doing it." "You still here causing trouble?" Marcus asked from the table. He was sitting there in a wrinkled t-shirt, stealing pieces of baked chicken straight from the serving plate. "And you're still eating before everybody sits down," Alyssa shot back. "Some of us have jobs. You work at your friend's tire shop 3 days a week. Relax." Marcus grinned. The kitchen was loud, crowded, and too warm from the oven. Her mother was stirring macaroni and cheese. Miss Evelyn was sitting at the table snapping green beans because she refused to let anybody else do it. Marcus kept reaching for food and getting his hand slapped away. It should have felt ordinary. Usually it did. But that night, while her family talked over each other and argued about whether Marcus was ever going to move out. Alyssa caught herself glancing at the clock. 6:15. Franklin should have been there already. He always came to family dinner. Even before they got married, he came. Especially before they got married. He text you? Lorraine asked without looking up from the stove. Alyssa looked over. Who? Her mother gave her a look. Girl, don't play with me. Franklin. He's probably just stuck at work. Miss Evelyn made a sound under her breath. That man has been stuck at work a whole lot lately. Grandma. What? I'm old, not blind. Marcus looked between them. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Alyssa said quickly. But even as she said it, she thought about the empty passenger seat in her car, thought about the way Franklin had been coming home later and later, thought about how he barely looked up from his phone lately. Fine. She had been saying that word so often lately she was starting to hate it. Before anybody could ask anything else, the front door opened. Sorry, Franklin called out. Traffic was awful. Alyssa turned. There he was, 6 feet tall, tie loosened, dark blonde hair still slightly damp from the humidity outside. He looked tired, but when he saw her, he smiled. For 1 second, the tight feeling in her chest disappeared. You made it, she said. Wouldn't miss Tuesday dinner, he said. Marcus pointed at him. You better not let Mama hear you call it Tuesday dinner. She'll think she invented a new holiday. Franklin laughed. The sound settled something inside Alyssa, because that was the thing about loving somebody for that long. Sometimes all it took was hearing their voice to make you believe everything was okay. Franklin had lived 3 streets away from her when they were kids. When Alyssa was 16, she used to see him riding his bike past her grandmother's house every afternoon in the summer. He was skinny back then, too tall for his body. Hair always a mess. The first time they really spoke was junior year chemistry. Mr. Kaplan assigned seats alphabetically. Alyssa Graham, Franklin Reed. He sat beside her, dropped his pencil on the floor 3 times in 10 minutes, and spent most of class staring out the window. Finally, she leaned over and said, If you fail this class, don't drag me down with you. He looked at her like he wasn't sure if she was serious. You always this mean? Only when people annoy me. Good to know. The next day, he brought her a grape soda from the vending machine. Peace offering, he said. For what? Future annoying behavior. She tried not to laugh. She failed. By October, they were inseparable. Franklin waited outside her last class every day. Alyssa started spending weekends at football games she did not care about just because he was there. The neighborhood noticed. Neighborhoods like theirs always noticed. Her aunt said, quietly, but not quietly enough, That white boy better not waste your time. Franklin's mother worried in her own way, not because she disliked Alyssa, because she knew the world would. People are going to say things, she told him one night. Then let them, Franklin said. At 16, love feels simple because you do not know yet how many things can get in the way of it. Alyssa and Franklin learned fast. There were teachers who assumed they could not possibly be together. There were strangers at restaurants who stared too long. There were people in both families who asked questions that were really judgments wearing better clothes. But every time things got uncomfortable, Franklin reached for her hand. Every time somebody made Alyssa feel like she was too much or not enough, Franklin looked at her like she was the easiest choice in the world. That was why everybody eventually stopped questioning them, not because life got easier, because they kept choosing each other anyway. The summer after graduation, Miss Evelyn ended up in the hospital. Congestive heart failure, the doctor said. Alyssa still remembered the smell of that waiting room. Burnt coffee, bleach, fear. Her mother was crying in the bathroom. Marcus was only 14 and pretending not to be scared. Alyssa sat in one of those hard plastic chairs staring at the floor. Then somebody sat beside her. Franklin. He had grease on his hands from working with his dad all day. You didn't have to come, she said. Yeah, he said softly. I did. He stayed 6 hours. He bought terrible coffee from the vending machine. He made Marcus laugh by pretending to fight with the broken vending machine in the hallway. He held Alyssa's hand when the doctor finally came out. Around midnight, Alyssa looked over at him asleep in the chair beside her, his head tilted awkwardly against the wall. And for the first time in her life, she had the strange, steady feeling that no matter what happened, She would never have to go through it alone. Nobody ever looked at Alyssa and Franklin and thought they had an easy kind of love. By 23, they were living in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on Flagler Street with thin walls, crooked floors, and an air conditioner that sounded like it was dying every time it turned on. The first night they moved in, they sat cross-legged on the living room floor because they didn't have a couch yet. They had one mattress, 2 folding chairs Marcus found on the curb, and a coffee table Franklin built out of an old wooden pallet he found behind a construction site. Alyssa looked around the apartment and laughed. "This place is ugly," she said. Franklin opened the pizza box between them. "You say that now. Give it 6 months, and you're going to be emotionally attached to that stain on the ceiling." She looked up. There was, in fact, a water stain in the shape of Florida. "You're right," she said. "That's our son now." For the first few years, life felt like one long stretch of trying to catch up. Alyssa worked at the pediatric clinic during the day and picked up extra shifts at an urgent care office twice a week. Franklin worked construction with his father, came home covered in drywall dust, showered, and spent his nights studying for his contractor's license at the little kitchen table. Most evenings looked the same. Franklin surrounded by flashcards and code books. Alyssa heating up canned soup or boxed rice because it was cheap, the television playing quietly in the background. The sound of the laundromat machines downstairs rattling through the floor. One night, Alyssa came home after a 12-hour shift and found Franklin asleep at the table. His head was resting on an open study guide. One hand still held a pencil. She stood there for a second, just looking at him. He looked exhausted, younger than he was, and older at the same time. There was a note sitting beside him. "I tried to wait up. Soup's in the microwave. Love you." Alyssa smiled to herself, walked over, and kissed the top of his head. Franklin startled awake. "What time is it?" "Too late," she said. "I was studying." "You were snoring on chapter 4. That's how I learn." She laughed. There were hard months, too. The summer their car broke down on I-95, they had exactly $312 in their checking account. Franklin kicked the tire so hard, he nearly hurt his foot. "Don't start," Alyssa said, standing on the side of the road with sweat running down her back. "I am so tired of us always being one problem away from broke." She looked at him. His face was red, angry, embarrassed, not at her, at himself. Franklin had always carried around this quiet fear that he wasn't enough, not successful enough, not smart enough, not the kind of man who could give Alyssa the life she deserved. She walked over and took his hand. "Hey," she said. He looked away. "Franklin, you should have more than this by now." "More than what?" He looked around at the broken car, the highway, the heat, this. Alyssa squeezed his hand harder. "I don't care about this car. I care that you're standing beside me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a second, that old sadness in him softened. They caught a ride home with Marcus, who spent the entire drive making fun of Franklin. "You know the car broke because you keep driving around listening to those terrible classic rock stations." "That's not how engines work," Franklin said. "I don't know. Feels racist against black radio to me." Alyssa laughed so hard she cried. Somehow that was always how they survived. They found reasons to laugh inside things that should have broken them. The year Franklin finally passed his contractor's exam, Alyssa cried harder than he did. He came running into the apartment waving the envelope over his head. "I passed," he shouted. She nearly dropped the spaghetti pot in the sink. "You did?" "I passed." She ran into his arms so fast, he stumbled backward into the refrigerator. That night they celebrated with takeout Chinese food because it was all they could afford. Franklin kept smiling down at the certificate like he couldn't believe it was real. "This is gonna change things," he said. "I know. I'm gonna take care of you, Liz." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You've been taking care of me since we were 16. Years later, when they finally got married, there was no ballroom, no giant flower wall, no fancy venue. They got married in Lorraine's backyard, under a white tent. Marcus helped set up crooked. Miss Evelyn cried before the ceremony even started. Denise fixed Alyssa's hair in the kitchen, while Lorraine kept yelling from the other room that somebody needed to put the potato salad back in the cooler. Franklin wore a gray suit that fit him a little too tightly in the shoulders. Alyssa wore a simple ivory dress she bought on sale. When she walked down the aisle, Franklin looked at her like he had looked at her at 16, like she was still the best thing that had ever happened to him. During his vows, his voice cracked. "There has never been a version of my life that didn't feel better with you in it," he said. Alyssa started crying. So did half the people in folding chairs. Even Marcus, though he denied it later. Afterward, everybody danced in the backyard until the mosquitoes came out, and Miss Evelyn started complaining about her feet. Late that night, after everybody had gone home, Alyssa and Franklin sat alone on the back steps. The house was quiet. The yard was full of empty paper plates and half-deflated balloons. Alyssa slipped her hand into his. "We're really married," she said. Franklin kissed the back of her hand. "You stuck with me now?" She smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. They had survived too much together already. Too many years. Too many hard seasons. Sitting there beside him under the porch light, Alyssa honestly believed there was nothing in the world strong enough to take them apart. The first time Alyssa noticed the new shirts, she was folding laundry. Franklin had always dressed the same. Old t-shirts around the house, work boots by the front door, the same handful of button-downs whenever he had to look nice. But suddenly there were crisp new shirts hanging in the closet, with tags from stores he normally said were too expensive. Blue, gray, one pale green shirt Alyssa had never seen him wear before. She held it up. "Since when do you wear this color?" Franklin looked up from his phone. "What color?" "Green." He shrugged. "They said I should dress different at work now." It was a small word. Still, something about it sat strangely with her. A few weeks earlier, Franklin had gotten a new position at the real estate development company downtown. Better pay, better office, longer hours. At first, Alyssa had been happy for him. He had worked so hard for so many years. He deserved something that made him feel proud. But somewhere between the promotion and the new office, something about him started changing. It wasn't all at once. That was what made it easy to ignore. It came in small pieces. A new bottle of cologne sitting on the bathroom counter. Franklin standing in front of the mirror longer than usual before work. Him checking his phone during dinner and smiling at something before turning the screen face down. One night, Alyssa came home and found him in the kitchen wearing one of the new shirts. "You look nice," she said. He glanced down. "You think?" "Yeah. You going somewhere?" "Just a company dinner." "You didn't mention a company dinner." "I found out this afternoon." He kissed her cheek and grabbed his keys. "Don't wait up." The front door closed. Alyssa stood alone in the kitchen holding a wooden spoon and staring at the half-finished pot of spaghetti. By the time he got home that night, she was asleep. Or pretending to be. He smelled like cologne and outside air. The next morning, she found the receipt from a restaurant in Brickell in his pocket. 2 dinners, 2 drinks. She looked at it for a long time. Then she threw it in the trash. Because when you have loved somebody that long, you do not want to become the kind of person who goes looking for reasons not to trust them. You tell yourself there is an explanation. You tell yourself, maybe it was a coworker. Maybe somebody from the office forgot their wallet. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're insecure. Maybe love means giving somebody the benefit of the doubt one more time. So that was what Alyssa did. She gave him one more time. Then another and another. Weeks passed. Franklin started staying later and later. He missed Sunday dinner twice in 1 month. The second time, Lorraine looked at the empty chair at the table and frowned. "That boy better not be dead," she said. "Mama, I'm serious. Franklin has never missed my peach cobbler 2 Sundays in a row." Miss Evelyn glanced over her glasses. "Something's off." "Nothing's off," Alyssa said too quickly. Marcus looked at her. He didn't say anything, but she could tell he didn't believe her. At home, the distance between her and Franklin grew in ways that were hard to explain. He still sat beside her on the couch at night, still asked if she wanted takeout, still kissed her goodbye in the morning. But he felt farther away than people who lived in different states. One Thursday night, Alyssa was halfway through a reality show she wasn't really watching when she finally looked over at him. Franklin was sitting beside her with his phone in his hand. The television light flickered across his face. He looked distracted, almost somewhere else. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said automatically. "You don't seem okay." "I'm fine, just tired." Alyssa muted the television. "You've been tired for 3 months." Franklin let out a breath and rubbed his face. "It's work, Liz. I know it's work, but you barely talk to me anymore." "That's not true." "Then look at me and tell me what's going on." For a second, she thought he would. His eyes met hers. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down, too fast, too automatically, and something cold moved through her chest. "Who was that?" She asked. "Nobody. Work." He stood up. "I'm gonna take a shower." Then he walked away. Alyssa sat there alone on the couch listening to the bathroom door close. The television was still muted. The room was quiet, except for the sound of water running through the pipes. That night, Franklin fell asleep facing the other side of the bed. Alyssa lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. The streetlight outside cast a pale strip of light across the room. She could hear his breathing, steady, familiar, the same sound she had fallen asleep beside for years. But for the first time since she was 16 years old, Alyssa looked at the man lying inches away from her and had the terrible feeling that she no longer knew where he was. By the next week, Alyssa had almost convinced herself she was imagining things. Not because Franklin had changed. If anything, he seemed farther away. But because she was tired. Tired people can make themselves believe almost anything if the truth feels too painful to hold. That Thursday afternoon, she stopped at the beauty supply store on her way home from work. Her roots were growing out. Denise had been making fun of her for 2 weeks. "You out here looking like you gave up," she'd said over the phone. "I have not given up. Alyssa, your hairline says otherwise." So, Alyssa parked in front of the little strip mall near Northwest 7th Avenue and went inside. The store smelled like hair oil, perfume, and the faint chemical smell of relaxer. By the time she came back outside with a plastic bag in one hand and her keys in the other, she heard somebody call her name. "Alyssa?" Miss Carla was standing beside a silver sedan 2 spaces away. Miss Carla had lived down the street from Alyssa her whole life. She was one of those neighborhood women who always knew everybody's business before they did. As a kid, Alyssa had been afraid of her. As an adult, she mostly found her exhausting. "Hey, Miss Carla," Alyssa said. Miss Carla smiled, but it looked strange, tight, uncomfortable. "How you doing, baby?" "I'm okay." Miss Carla nodded. Then she looked away, then back at Alyssa. "You and Franklin doing all right?" Alyssa felt something in her stomach tighten. It was the same feeling she got when the phone rang too late at night. "Why?" "Nothing," Miss Carla said quickly. Then she sighed. "No, that's not true. I don't know if I should say this." Alyssa stood still. Cars moved through the parking lot behind them. Somebody nearby was arguing with a child about getting back in the car. The whole world kept moving like this was a normal Thursday. "Say what?" Alyssa asked. Miss Carla lowered her voice. "I saw Franklin last Thursday at Bayside." Alyssa waited. "Okay." He wasn't alone. For a second, Alyssa did not understand the words. They just hung there between them. Then her face went hot. "It was probably work," she said too fast. "Maybe a client or somebody from his office." Miss Carla looked at her for a long moment. "Baby." He was holding her hand. The bag slipped a little in Alyssa's fingers. "You sure it was him?" "I've known that boy since he was riding a bike with no shirt on and too much sunscreen on his nose. I know it was him." Alyssa laughed, not because anything was funny, because sometimes your body does strange things when your heart is trying not to break in public. "Well," she said, "maybe you saw wrong." Miss Carla's face softened. "I hope I did." Alyssa nodded once. Then she got into her car before Miss Carla could say anything else. She sat there with the engine off. The air inside the car felt too hot. Her hands were shaking. She looked down at the beauty supply bag in her lap and suddenly wanted to throw it across the parking lot. Holding her hand, the words followed her all the way home. They followed her into the shower, into bed, into work. The next morning, at the clinic, she tried to focus. She handed out stickers. She checked charts. She smiled at parents. But every time she stopped moving, the thought came back, holding her hand. A little girl with pigtails sat on the exam table swinging her legs. "Miss Alyssa?" "You forgot my dinosaur sticker." Alyssa blinked. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You're right." The little girl frowned. "You look sad today." Alyssa forced a smile. "Just tired." By lunchtime, she had read the same patient chart 3 times. By 3 o'clock, she accidentally called another nurse by the wrong name. By 5, she felt like she was moving underwater. Maybe Miss Carla was wrong. Maybe she had seen somebody else. Maybe Franklin had been helping a coworker through the crowd. Maybe there was an explanation. There had to be. There had to be, because the other option was too ugly, too impossible. That night, Franklin came home just after 7. Traffic was awful, he said, tossing his keys on the counter. Alyssa was already sitting at the kitchen table. She had made chicken, rice, and green beans. Franklin sat down across from her and started talking. Something about a new project. Something about a man at work who kept missing deadlines. Something about parking downtown. Alyssa stared at him, at his face, at the way his wedding ring flashed when he picked up his fork, at the mouth she had kissed for half her life, holding her hand. "You okay?" Franklin asked. She realized he had stopped talking. "What?" I said, "Are you okay?" "Yeah," she said. He nodded and went back to talking, but Alyssa could not hear a single word, because all she could think was that somewhere in this city there might be another woman who knew what his laugh sounded like now. The question sat inside Alyssa for 2 days before she finally asked it. 2 days of watching Franklin move around the house like everything was normal. 2 days of staring at his face and wondering if she was losing her mind. By Saturday night, she couldn't take it anymore. Franklin was standing at the stove making eggs because he said breakfast food sounded better than real dinner. Alyssa was leaning against the kitchen counter with her arms crossed. The television was on in the living room, but neither of them was watching it. "Who is she?" Alyssa asked. Franklin looked up. "What?" "The woman you've been seeing." For 1 second, everything in the room went still. The pan hissed. The refrigerator hummed. Franklin stared at her. Then he laughed once, not because it was funny, because he wanted time. "What are you talking about?" "Miss Carla saw you at Bayside." Franklin turned back toward the stove. "Miss Carla needs to mind her business." "So, there was a woman." "There are women at Bayside, Alyssa." "Franklin," he put the spatula down too hard. "I was there with people from work. Holding somebody's hand." He turned around. "You really believe neighborhood gossip over me?" Alyssa looked at him. "I believe what I've been feeling for months." "Feeling what?" "You don't talk to me anymore. You barely look at me. You come home late. You're on your phone all the time. You smell like cologne I didn't buy and restaurants I didn't go to. So now you're tracking what I smell like? Don't do that." "Do what?" "Make me feel crazy because I noticed you're different." Franklin grabbed his plate and walked past her into the living room. Alyssa followed him. "I'm talking to you." "No," he snapped. "You're accusing me." "Then tell me I'm wrong." "You are wrong." "Look me in the eye and say it." Franklin opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the floor, at the couch, at the television, everywhere except her. And that was when Alyssa knew. Not everything, not who the woman was, not how long it had been happening, but enough. Enough to know that something between them had shifted in a way she did not know how to fix. "There is nobody else," Franklin said finally, quietly, still not looking at her. Alyssa felt something break loose inside her, not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, terrible crack. "You're lying," she whispered. Franklin's head snapped up. "I am not lying." "Then why can't you look at me?" "Because you're acting ridiculous." "Ridiculous?" "You know what? I'm done with this. I work all day. I come home exhausted. And now I have to defend myself because Miss Carla saw me talking to somebody?" Holding her hand. "I wasn't holding anybody's hand." "Then why are you yelling?" Franklin stared at her. His face had gone red. The vein in his neck stood out the way it always did when he was angry. But underneath the anger, there was something else. Fear. Alyssa had known him too long not to see it. He ran both hands through his hair. "I can't do this right now." Then he walked past her down the hallway and slammed the bedroom door. Alyssa stood in the living room alone. The eggs were still sitting in the pan. One of them had started to burn. She turned off the stove. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and cried quietly into her hands, not because she had proof, because she did not, because if he had just admitted it, Maybe at least she could have stopped feeling crazy. Later that night, Franklin climbed into bed without saying anything. He turned toward the wall. Alyssa lay beside him in the dark. There was more space between them than there had ever been. She moved closer to the edge of the mattress until she could feel empty air beside her shoulder. Franklin's back was inches away. She stared at it for a long time. The shape of the man she had loved since she was 16. The man she used to tell everything. The man who once sat beside her all night in a hospital waiting room. Now she lay there staring at his back in the dark and realized she no longer knew what was true. After that night, Alyssa stopped asking questions. Not because she trusted Franklin, because she was afraid of what she would hear if she kept going. So instead, she did what a lot of women do when they are hurting. She pretended. She went to work. She answered texts. She folded laundry. She stood beside Franklin at the grocery store while he compared cereal prices like they were still the same people they had always been. But more and more, she found herself driving to her mother's house, sometimes after work, sometimes on weekends, sometimes for no reason at all. Lorraine noticed first. One Thursday evening, Alyssa was standing at the kitchen sink, drying dishes while Lorraine wrapped leftovers in foil. "You want to tell me what's wrong?" Lorraine asked. "Nothing's wrong." "Alyssa, Mama, I'm fine." Lorraine shut the refrigerator door. "You have been coming over here 4 nights a week. You barely eat, and every time your phone rings you look like you're waiting for bad news. So no, you're not fine." Alyssa kept drying the same plate. "It's just work. Don't insult me." The words were sharp, but Lorraine's voice was soft. That almost made it worse. Alyssa looked down at the dish towel in her hands. "I think something's wrong with Franklin," she said quietly. Lorraine went still. "What kind of wrong?" Alyssa swallowed. "I don't know." But that was a lie. Deep down, she did know. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Marcus noticed too. The next Sunday after dinner, he found her sitting alone on the back steps, staring out at the yard. The paper plates had already been thrown away. Miss Evelyn was asleep inside in her chair. Lorraine was in the kitchen, humming while she washed dishes. Marcus sat down beside her. "You know you don't have to keep pretending everything's okay, right?" "I'm not pretending." "Alyssa, you cried because Mama bought the wrong kind of rolls." Despite herself, she laughed. "Those rolls were terrible. See? That's not a normal reaction to bread." For a second, she almost told him everything. About Miss Carla, about the lies, about the feeling that every time Franklin looked at his phone, he was disappearing a little more, but the words got stuck. Because if she said them out loud, they would become real, and she still wasn't ready for that. The worst part was church. The following Sunday, Alyssa sat beside Lorraine in the third pew like she always had. Franklin said he had to work. Again, the church smelled like perfume, old hymn books, and fried chicken from the fellowship hall downstairs. People hugged her on the way in. Miss Janice squeezed her hand too long. "How you holding up, baby?" Alyssa blinked. "Holding up from what?" Miss Janice looked uncomfortable. "Nothing. I just mean, life." Then later, one of the women from the choir leaned over after service. "You tell Franklin we're praying for him at that job." The way she said it made Alyssa's stomach turn. Too careful, too soft. Like people sounded when they already knew something terrible and were waiting for you to catch up. By the time she got outside, she could barely breathe. Humiliation was worse than suspicion. Suspicion hurt. Humiliation hollowed you out. It made you feel small. It made you feel stupid. It made you wonder how long everybody else had been watching your life fall apart while you kept smiling and bringing potato salad to Sunday dinner. After church, everybody went back to Lorraine's house. Alyssa lasted through maybe 10 minutes of conversation, long enough for Miss Evelyn to ask why Franklin never came around anymore, long enough for Lorraine to pretend not to notice Alyssa flinch. Then she stood up. "I need some air," she said. Marcus followed her outside without saying anything. She got into his car because it was parked at the curb and because she needed somewhere that wasn't full of people who loved her enough to notice she was braking. Marcus sat in the driver's seat. Alyssa sat beside him. For a minute, neither of them said anything. Then Marcus reached over and handed her the fast food napkins he kept stuffed in the glove compartment. "You always cry in my car," he said quietly. That was all it took. Alyssa covered her face with both hands and finally broke. The crying came hard, ugly, the kind that made it hard to breathe. "Everybody knows," she said. Marcus looked at her. "What are you talking about?" "I think he's seeing somebody else, and everybody knows except me." Marcus went completely still. "Who said that?" "Nobody had to. They look at me like—" She wiped at her face. "Like they're sorry for me." Marcus stared out the windshield for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Then he's a damn fool." Alyssa let out a broken laugh. "Marcus." "No, I mean it. If he is doing this to you after everything, he's a fool." She leaned her head against the window. Outside, she could see her mother's house, the same house where she had grown up, the same porch where Franklin used to sit waiting for her when they were teenagers. Back then, she had believed there was nothing they couldn't survive. Now, for the first time, she was beginning to wonder if love could disappear while two people were still living in the same house. Tuesday night arrived quiet and ordinary, which somehow made what happened worse. Franklin came home late again. He said he had been stuck in a meeting downtown. Alyssa nodded like she believed him. She reheated leftovers. They ate in front of the television. He laughed once at something on the screen that she didn't even register. By then, she had gotten used to pretending she did not notice him checking his phone every few minutes, pretending she did not see the way he smiled down at the screen before turning it over, pretending she was not slowly disappearing inside her own marriage. Around 10:30, Franklin stood up from the couch and stretched. "I'm gonna take a shower," he said. "Okay." He walked down the hallway. A few seconds later, she heard the bathroom door close. Then, the shower turned on. Alyssa sat there staring at the television. Some woman on a reality show was screaming in a restaurant. The audience laughed. Then, Franklin's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Once, then again. Alyssa looked over. The screen lit up. "Can't wait for Saturday. I'm already looking for something to wear." For a second, she could not breathe. The message stayed there glowing in the dark kitchen. No name, just a number. But she knew. She knew the way people know when a glass has slipped off the edge of the table before they actually hear it hit the floor. The shower was still running. Alyssa stood up slowly, walked into the kitchen, picked up the phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She stared at the lock screen. Then, before she could stop herself, she typed in her birthday, 418. The phone unlocked. That hurt more than she expected. After everything, after all the lies, after all the distance, his password was still her birthday. Like some part of him still thought that meant he loved her. The messages opened where they had left off. There were months of them. At first, Alyssa could not make sense of what she was seeing. The words blurred. Then little pieces started to stand out. "You looked so good today. I hate when you leave. Wish I could stay over. Last night was worth every lie." Alyssa gripped the edge of the counter. There were pictures. A mirror selfie of a woman with long dark hair and a tight black dress. A picture Franklin had sent of the view from his office. A blurry photo of the two of them at some restaurant in Brickell. Franklin was smiling, the kind of smile Alyssa had not seen in months. Her stomach turned. She kept scrolling. She did not know why. Maybe because once your heart starts breaking, there is a part of you that wants to see how bad the damage really is. The woman's name was Vanessa. Vanessa from his office. Vanessa, who called him handsome. Vanessa, who sent him pictures while Alyssa was asleep in the next room. Vanessa, who joked about Alyssa like she was some obstacle standing in the way of a better life. One message made Alyssa sit down hard in the kitchen chair. "Does she suspect anything?" Franklin answered, "Not really. She notices I'm stressed, but that's it." Alyssa stared at the words, "Not really." Like the years they had spent together had made her so predictable, he could map out exactly how much pain she would ignore before she finally stopped trusting herself. The shower was still running. Alyssa could hear Franklin humming softly under the water. The sound nearly made her sick. Then she found the email. Company Charity Gala, Saturday. Brickell Grand, Hotel Ballroom. Formal attire, +1. Beneath it was a message from Franklin to Vanessa. "You better wear that black dress." Vanessa replied with a laughing emoji. "Only if your wife stays home." Alyssa sat there staring at the screen. Then she looked up at the kitchen around her. the dish towel hanging over the oven handle, the framed wedding picture on the refrigerator, the coffee mug Franklin used every morning, still sitting in the sink. How could a whole life look exactly the same when everything inside it had changed? She heard the shower turn off. Quickly, she locked the phone and set it back on the counter, exactly where it had been. Then she sat down at the kitchen table. Franklin walked into the room a few minutes later with wet hair and sweatpants. "You okay?" he asked. The question almost made her laugh. "I'm tired," she said. He nodded. "Me too." Then he kissed the top of her head and walked toward the bedroom. Alyssa sat there until she heard him get into bed. Then she picked the phone up again. This time she opened the gala invitation and stared at it until after midnight. Saturday, Brickell, Grand Hotel. Formal attire. +1. Franklin had told her he had to work late that night. Instead, he was taking Vanessa. For months, Alyssa had been asking herself how to save her marriage. Sitting alone at the kitchen table in the dark, she realized she was finally asking a different question. Why was she fighting so hard for somebody who had already stopped fighting for her? By Saturday afternoon, Alyssa had barely slept. She went to work Thursday. She called in sick Friday. She spent most of Friday sitting on the couch in sweatpants staring at nothing, while Franklin moved around the house talking about how busy work had been. He kissed her goodbye Friday morning. He asked if she wanted takeout Friday night. He stood in their kitchen, acting like a husband, while another woman texted him about what she was going to wear. By Saturday, Alyssa felt hollow. At noon, she called Denise. Denise answered on the second ring. "Please tell me you're not sitting in that house crying over that man." Alyssa closed her eyes. "How did you know?" "Because I've known you since 7th grade and you get quiet when you're hurt. Too quiet." There was a pause. "Come over," Denise said. Denise lived in a small apartment in Kendall with 2 noisy dogs and entirely too many throw pillows. By the time Alyssa got there, Denise already had wine open and music playing. "You look awful," Denise said the second she opened the door. "Thank you. I mean that with love." Alyssa laughed for the first time in days. Then she started crying. Denise wrapped her arms around her and held her in the doorway. "Come inside," she said softly. An hour later, Alyssa was sitting on Denise's couch with swollen eyes and an untouched glass of wine in her hand. She had told Denise everything. The messages, the lies, the gala, Vanessa. Denise sat beside her in silence for a moment. Then she said, "I want to kill him." Alyssa let out a weak laugh. "Get in line." "No, seriously. Marcus can help me hide the body." "Denise." "What? He's handy." For a second, they both laughed. Then Denise looked at her, really looked at her. "You know what's making me the angriest?" "What?" "You keep talking about this like you did something wrong." "I didn't say that." "You don't have to. It's all over your face." Alyssa looked down at her hands. "Maybe if I had paid more attention." "Stop." "Maybe if I hadn't been so tired all the time, or if I had tried harder, or—" "Alyssa," Denise leaned forward. "Do not sit here and make yourself smaller so his choices make more sense." The room went quiet. Nobody had ever said it to her like that before. Denise got up suddenly. "Come here." "What are you doing?" "Trust me." Alyssa followed her into the bedroom. Denise opened her closet and started moving hangers around. "No," Alyssa said immediately. "Absolutely not." Denise turned around, holding a dress. It was deep red, elegant, simple, the kind of dress that did not need to beg for attention because it knew it already had it. "I cannot wear that." "Yes, you can." "Denise, I haven't worn anything like that in years." "I know. It's too much." "No," Denise said. "You've just spent so much time trying not to be too much for everybody else that now anything powerful feels wrong." Alyssa looked at the dress, then at herself in Denise's bedroom mirror. She was wearing jeans and one of Franklin's old t-shirts. Her hair was pulled back. Her face looked tired, small, like she had been apologizing for existing inside her own life. Denise walked over and put the dress in her hands. "You've been dressing like somebody trying not to take up space," she said quietly. "Tonight, take up all of it." Alyssa stared at the dress for a long moment. Then she nodded. An hour later, she stood in Denise's bedroom wearing the red dress. Denise had curled her hair, helped her with her makeup, put earrings in her ears that she swore made her look expensive. "You look like the woman who paid half the bills while that fool was pretending he built his life by himself," Denise said. Alyssa smiled. Then she looked in the mirror. For a second, she did not recognize herself. Not because she looked different, because she looked like somebody who had finally remembered she mattered. By 9:17, Alyssa was standing outside the ballroom doors at the Brickell Grand Hotel. The music was loud enough to vibrate through the walls. Denise stood beside her. "You still have time to leave," Denise said quietly. Alyssa looked through the narrow opening between the doors. Franklin was near the bar. He was wearing the gray suit she bought him 2 Christmases ago, the one he said made him feel important. And beside him stood Vanessa, the black dress, the long dark hair, one hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. Vanessa leaned in and whispered something. Franklin laughed. Then Vanessa looked toward the ballroom entrance and smiled. Not a real smile, a smug one. The kind of smile people wear when they think they already won. Alyssa felt something inside her settle, not because she was no longer hurt, because she was done being surprised. "No," she said softly. "I need to do this." Then she pushed open the doors. People talking, glasses clinking, music playing. Nobody stopped and stared the way they do in movies. Real life was quieter than that. But one by one, people looked up. Alyssa walked through the room in the red dress, her back straight, her head high, not because she felt strong, because she was too tired to keep shrinking. Franklin saw her halfway across the room. The color drained from his face. "Oh my God," Denise muttered under her breath behind her. Vanessa turned. The smile disappeared. For a second, nobody moved. Then Franklin started walking toward her. "Alyssa," he said, his voice low and panicked. "What are you doing here?" She looked at him, really looked at him. The man she had loved since she was 16. The man who had sat beside her in a hospital waiting room. The man who had promised in Lorraine's backyard that there had never been a version of his life that didn't feel better with her in it. And suddenly, all she could see was a stranger. "You forgot to mention you had a +1, she said. "Can we talk somewhere else?" "No." "Alyssa, please. You've hidden enough." Vanessa was standing a few feet away now. She looked embarrassed, ashamed even. But Alyssa could not make herself care, because Vanessa was not the one who had promised her forever. Franklin reached for her arm. She stepped back. "Don't. Please let me explain." "Explain what?" Alyssa asked quietly. "The part where you lied to me every day, or the part where you let me sit at home feeling crazy while everybody else knew what you were doing?" Franklin looked around. People were pretending not to stare, pretending not to listen, but they were. Of course they were. Alyssa turned toward Vanessa. For a second, the two women looked at each other. Vanessa looked younger up close, nervous, uncomfortable, not smug anymore. Alyssa felt strangely calm. "You can have him," she said. Franklin closed his eyes. "Alyssa," she kept looking at Vanessa, "because the man I married would never have done this to me." Then she turned around and walked away. Behind her, she heard Franklin call her name. Then footsteps, fast, desperate. She pushed through the ballroom doors and into the hotel lobby. Franklin followed right behind her. The hotel lobby was almost empty. A man in a dark suit stood behind the front desk, pretending not to watch. A couple walked past with shopping bags and never looked up. The fountain near the elevators made a soft, steady sound. Alyssa stopped near the front doors and wrapped her arms around herself. The air conditioning suddenly felt too cold against her skin. Behind her, she heard Franklin push through the ballroom doors. "Alyssa, wait." She didn't turn around. "Please." His voice cracked. That almost made her angrier, because for months she had been the one crying, the one lying awake, the one trying to hold together something he had already decided to break. "What?" she said finally, turning to face him. "What do you want to say?" Franklin looked wrecked. His face was pale. His tie was loose. His eyes were already red. "I'm sorry," he said. Alyssa laughed once. It came out sharp. "You are always sorry after. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" Franklin opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "No," Alyssa said, stepping closer. "Tell me." Because I have spent months blaming myself. I have spent months wondering if I stopped being enough somehow, if I was too tired or too busy or too boring. Alyssa, don't. Her voice shook. Do not stand here and say my name like you're the one who gets to comfort me. Franklin looked down. For the first time all night, he looked ashamed, not defensive, not angry. Ashamed. I messed up, he said quietly. No. Alyssa shook her head. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is saying something cruel when you're angry. You lied to me every day for months. You looked me in my face and made me feel crazy. Tears filled Franklin's eyes. I know, do you? She asked. Do you know what it feels like to sit in church and realize everybody is looking at you with pity? Do you know what it feels like when the whole neighborhood knows your husband is cheating before you do? Franklin covered his face with one hand. Please stop. No, you don't get to ask me to stop now. The words came faster then, years of them. The loneliness, the humiliation, the way she had kept making excuses for him because she loved him. The worst part wasn't even that you cheated, she said. Franklin looked up. It was that you let me think I was imagining it. You let me sit in that house feeling insecure and stupid and crazy while you kept lying to me. A tear slid down Franklin's face. She had never seen him cry like that. Not when his father lost his job. Not when Miss Evelyn got sick. Not even at their wedding. I don't know why I did it, he whispered. Alyssa stared at him. At first she wanted to tell him that was a lie too. But then she looked at him more carefully, and she realized he meant it. Franklin really didn't know, because people do not usually destroy the things they love for one simple reason. They do it because there is something broken inside them they keep trying to fill. Franklin had spent years feeling like he wasn't enough, not successful enough, not impressive enough, and somewhere along the way, another woman's attention had made him feel like a different version of himself, a better one. More important, wanted, but instead of facing what was wrong inside him, he had used somebody else to cover it up, and now he was standing in front of the woman who had loved him half his life with nothing left except regret. I loved you, he said. Alyssa looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said softly. That made him cry harder. Please, he said, please don't leave me. I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want. I'll quit my job. I'll go to therapy. You should have thought about that before tonight. He stepped toward her. Alyssa. She stepped back. I have spent years loving you, she said, and somewhere in there, I forgot to love myself too. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Alyssa turned and walked toward the hotel doors. Behind her, she heard Franklin say her name one last time. She did not turn around. Outside, the night air was warm and thick. Denise was waiting by the car. She looked past Alyssa toward the hotel entrance where Franklin was standing alone under the bright lobby lights. You okay? Denise asked quietly. Alyssa looked straight ahead. No, she said. Then she got in the car. A week later, Alyssa moved into a one-bedroom apartment across town. It was small. 3rd floor, no elevator, beige carpet, a balcony that looked out over the parking lot, and a broken vending machine. It was not the kind of place she used to imagine for herself, but it was hers. Marcus carried the boxes upstairs. Denise brought cleaning supplies and wine. Lorraine stood in the kitchen, criticizing the cabinets. These are cheap, she said. Mama, I'm just saying, cheap cabinets. Miss Evelyn sat in a folding chair by the window and looked around the apartment. It's too quiet in here, she said. That's because Marcus isn't here eating all your groceries, Alyssa said. Marcus pointed at her. I'm grieving too, you know. Everybody laughed. For a minute, it almost felt normal. Then they all went home, and the apartment got quiet. Too quiet. Alyssa stood in the middle of the living room surrounded by half-open boxes. There was no television on, no Franklin in the kitchen, no familiar sound of him moving through the apartment. For years, she had wanted space. Now she had it, and it hurt. The first night, she slept on top of the blankets because she had not found the fitted sheet yet. At 3 a.m, she rolled over half asleep and reached across the bed. Her hand landed on empty mattress. The grief hit her so suddenly she sat up. People talked about betrayal like it erased love. It didn't. That was the cruel part. You could still love somebody and know they had ruined everything. The next morning, there were flowers outside her apartment door. White lilies, her least favorite. Franklin never remembered that. There was a card. "I'm sorry. Please, talk to me." She threw them in the dumpster. Then she cried in the parking lot because even after everything, some part of her still wanted him to know which flower she liked. The calls started after that. Voicemails, texts, emails. Franklin's name lighting up her phone at midnight, at 6 in the morning, during work, outside the grocery store. One voicemail said, "I know you hate me, but please, just let me explain." Another said, "I ended it. I swear." Another was just silence and breathing before he hung up. Alyssa listened to all of them, then deleted them. Almost every time she wanted to call him back, especially at night. Nights were the worst. There was too much quiet, too much room for memory. She missed stupid things. The way Franklin always left cabinet doors open. The way he sang badly while he cooked. The way he used to reach for her hand in the grocery store without thinking. She did not miss the man he had become. She missed the man she thought he was. One Thursday, she came home from work and found a letter tucked under her apartment door. The envelope had Franklin's handwriting. She sat on the couch staring at it for almost an hour. Then she opened it. Inside, Franklin had written 4 pages. He said he was sorry. He said he did not know what was wrong with him. He said he had ruined the best thing in his life. At the bottom, he wrote, "You were the only person who ever made me feel like I was enough." Alyssa read that line 3 times. Then she folded the letter back up, because that had always been the problem. Franklin needed other people to tell him who he was. And somewhere along the way, she had made him the center of her life in the same way. They had spent years trying to save each other from things only they could fix themselves. The next Wednesday after work, Denise called. "You're coming with me." "Where?" "Pottery class." Alyssa frowned. "I do not want to make bowls." "Nobody wants to make bowls. That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "The point is, you need one thing in your life right now that does not have Franklin's name all over it." Alyssa almost said no. Then she looked around her apartment, at the unopened boxes, at the silence, at the life she was going to have to build, whether she wanted to or not. "Fine," she said quietly. Then she picked up her laptop and signed up for the Wednesday night pottery class. The first pottery class was a disaster. Alyssa sat at a spinning wheel in a room that smelled like wet clay and old coffee, while an older woman named Sharon tried to explain how to center the clay. "You have to stop fighting it," Sharon said. "I'm not fighting it." The lump of clay flew off the wheel and landed on the floor. Denise laughed so hard, she nearly fell off her chair. "That clay got somewhere to be," she said. For the first time in months, Alyssa laughed too, a real laugh, the kind that surprised her. After class, they went for tacos. Denise talked about work, about a terrible date, about one of her dogs eating an entire couch cushion. And for almost an hour, Alyssa did not think about Franklin. That scared her a little, then it made her feel free. The weeks passed slowly. Then all at once, Alyssa kept going to pottery class every Wednesday. She got better, not much, but enough that her bowls stopped looking like they had survived a natural disaster. She started saying yes when people invited her out after work. She let Denise drag her to brunch. She spent more evenings at Lorraine's house. She helped Miss Evelyn make peach cobbler. She listened to Marcus complain about his job. Little by little, life started feeling less like something that had happened to her and more like something she was still living. She also started therapy. The first session, she sat across from a woman named Dr. Ramirez and said, "I think maybe I stayed too long because I didn't know who I was without him." Dr. Ramirez nodded. "And who are you without him?" Alyssa stared at her. She did not know. That was the problem. For years, Alyssa had built her life around being Franklin's wife, the reliable one, the forgiving one, the woman who held everything together. She had made excuses for him, protected him, shrunk herself to keep the peace, and she had called it love. But sitting in Dr. Ramirez's office every Thursday evening, Alyssa started understanding something she had never let herself say before. Love and self-abandonment were not the same thing. Loving somebody did not mean disappearing for them. It did not mean accepting things that broke your spirit just because you had history. One Sunday afternoon, She sat in Lorraine's kitchen, while Miss Evelyn peeled apples at the table. "You know," Miss Evelyn said, "your grandfather embarrassed me one time so bad I didn't speak to him for 2 weeks." Alyssa looked up. "Grandma!" "I'm serious. He bought a motorcycle at 48 years old because some woman at his job said he looked too old." Marcus nearly choked on his drink. "Granddaddy had a motorcycle?" "For 6 weeks," Miss Evelyn said. "Then he fell off it in front of the Winn-Dixie." Everybody laughed. Then Miss Evelyn looked at Alyssa. "The difference is, your grandfather came home and told me the truth before he made a fool of himself." The room got quiet. Miss Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed Alyssa's hand. "Baby, there is a difference between standing by somebody and standing in front of them while they keep hurting you." Alyssa looked down at their hands. Then she nodded. By the end of the summer, Franklin stopped calling every day. The flowers stopped. The texts slowed down. One afternoon, she came home and found one last letter in her mailbox. She carried it upstairs, set it on the kitchen counter, stared at it for a long time. Then she opened the junk drawer beside the refrigerator and dropped it inside unopened. Because for the first time, she realized she did not need to know what Franklin had to say in order to keep moving forward. By October, the air in Miami was still hot. But something in Alyssa had changed. Not all at once. Not enough that she woke up one morning suddenly healed. Healing did not work like that. It happened slowly, in little pieces. In Wednesday night pottery classes, in laughing too hard at something Marcus said, in buying a couch for the apartment without wondering whether Franklin would like it, in whole afternoons where she forgot to check her phone. Then, one Saturday evening, there was a knock at her door. Alyssa looked through the peephole. Franklin was standing outside. For a second, she just stared at him. He looked thinner. His hair needed cutting. There were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like somebody who had not been sleeping. Part of her wanted to pretend she was not home. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face. Instead, she opened it. "What are you doing here?" Franklin looked down. "Can I come in?" "No." He nodded once, like he deserved that. For a second, neither of them spoke. The hallway smelled faintly like somebody's dinner. A television was playing somewhere in another apartment. Finally, Franklin said, "I ended it with Vanessa." Alyssa leaned against the door frame. "Okay, Alyssa. What do you want me to say?" "I want another chance." She looked at him. Months ago, those words would have destroyed her. Months ago, she might have begged for them. Now they mostly made her tired. "Why?" she asked. Franklin swallowed. "Because I was wrong. Because I ruined the best thing in my life. Because every day without you feels like punishment." Alyssa crossed her arms. "You had every day with me." He looked like she had slapped him. "I know." "No," she said quietly. "I don't think you do." Franklin rubbed his hands together, the old nervous habit he had when he did not know what to do. "I've been going to therapy," he said. Alyssa said nothing. "I finally understand. I spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't enough. And when Vanessa paid attention to me, I liked the version of myself I was with her. I felt important." "So you destroyed our marriage because somebody made you feel interesting. When you say it like that, how else should I say it?" Franklin closed his eyes. "You're right." The hallway got quiet. For the first time since all of this had started, Franklin was not making excuses. He was not blaming work, or stress, or Alyssa. He looked broken open. "You were always there," he said softly. "You loved me even when I didn't deserve it, and instead of appreciating that, I started taking it for granted." Alyssa looked at him. The strange thing was, she believed him, not because he had finally found the perfect words, because he looked like a man who had run out of lies. "I am so sorry," he whispered. Alyssa felt tears sting her eyes, not because she wanted him back, because this was the apology she had needed months ago, before the lies, before the humiliation, before the night in the red dress. But apologies came easier after consequences. That was the problem. Franklin was sorry now, because he was lonely, because Vanessa was gone, because the life he had wanted turned out not to be real. He was sorry now that he knew what it felt like to lose her. But Alyssa had been losing herself long before he noticed. I do forgive you, she said quietly. Franklin looked up so fast it almost hurt to watch. You do? She nodded. I forgive you because I don't want to carry this forever. Hope flickered across his face. Then she kept speaking. But I can't come back to a place that broke me. The hope disappeared. Franklin stood there, staring at her. His eyes filled with tears again. Alyssa reached for the door. Goodbye, Franklin. Then she closed it. On the other side, she leaned back against the door and cried. Not because she had made the wrong choice, because sometimes the right choice still hurts. A year later, Alyssa was standing in the produce section of Publix trying to decide if avocados were worth $2 each. Absolutely not, Marcus had said earlier that week. At that point, you're just paying for disappointment. She was smiling to herself when she reached for one. Then she heard somebody say her name. Alyssa? She turned. Franklin was standing at the end of the aisle. For a second, the whole store seemed to go quiet. Not really. There was still music playing, still a cart squeaking somewhere, still a child asking for cereal. But inside her, everything went still. Franklin looked older, not dramatically, just tired. There was gray at his temples she did not remember. His shoulders seemed smaller somehow, like life had finally caught up with him. Hi, he said. Hi. He looked down at the basket in her hand. How have you been? Alyssa thought about lying. Fine, good, busy. Instead, she said, better. Franklin nodded. I'm glad. And the thing was, he sounded like he meant it. For a moment, they just stood there between the avocados and the oranges. Two people who had once known each other better than anybody else, now strangers, or something worse. People with too much history. How's your mom? Franklin asked. Still complaining about everybody's cooking. He smiled a little. Miss Evelyn? Same. Marcus? Alyssa laughed softly, still acting like he's 17. Franklin smiled again. For a second, she saw the boy from chemistry class, the one with messy hair and grape soda. Then it was gone. I think about you, he said quietly. Alyssa looked at him. He looked embarrassed for saying it. I know, she said. He nodded. I wish things had been different. She did too. She wished he had talked to her when he felt lost instead of finding comfort somewhere else. She wished he had chosen honesty before he chose regret. She wished the man she loved had been stronger than the emptiness inside him, but wishing did not change anything. Take care of yourself, Franklin, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. You too. Alyssa picked up her basket and walked away. At the end of the aisle, she looked back once. Franklin was still standing there. Then she turned the corner and kept walking. This time, she did not look back again. Years later, Alyssa was sitting in the break room at the pediatric clinic when one of the younger nurses came in crying. Her name was Brianna. She was 24 and too young to already look that tired. Alyssa handed her a tissue. What happened? Brianna sat down across from her. He keeps saying he loves me, she said. But every time I catch him doing something wrong, somehow I end up apologizing. Alyssa was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled sadly. I know that feeling. Brianna wiped her eyes. How do you know when to leave? The old version of Alyssa would have rushed to make her feel better, would have said something easy. Relationships are hard. People make mistakes, fight for love. But life had taught her something different. You leave when loving somebody starts costing you your self-respect, she said. Brianna looked down at her hands. Alyssa leaned back in her chair. For a second, she thought about the hotel ballroom, the black dress, Franklin's face when he saw her, the woman she had been before that night, and the woman she became after. I spent too much time thinking love meant proving I was worth choosing, she said quietly. Then one day, I realized the right person doesn't make you compete for the place you've already earned. Brianna looked up. Alyssa smiled, not because the story no longer hurt, because it didn't own her anymore. That night, Alyssa went home to the small house she eventually bought for herself. The living room was warm. There were pictures on the wall. A half-finished pottery bowl sat crooked on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that felt peaceful now. As she walked past her bedroom, she paused at the closet. Hanging in the back was the red dress. She had not worn it again. Maybe she never would. But she kept it, not because it reminded her of what Franklin did, because it reminded her of the night she finally chose herself. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed too long in a relationship because you kept hoping the person you loved would become the person they used to be? And if you've ever had to choose yourself after being hurt, I want you to know you're not alone. Comment below and tell me, what do you think was the moment Alyssa finally realized she deserved better? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that real love should never make you compete for a place you've already earned.
Thank you for watching Mr. Graham Stories, my beautiful, amazing family.